tribunal said comments about the two men were of the most unpleasant nature and racially highly offensive. The leader of the Liberal Democrats has said her party would not prop up a government led by Boris Johnson or Jeremy Corbyn because they're not up to the job. Also tonight, could it be curtains for the common cold? Scientists believe they've made a breakthrough that could ward off the virus, which leads to more than 30 million days off work each year. The Prime Minister of Luxembourg, Xavier Bettel, has launched a stinging attack on the British government, describing the Brexit process as a nightmare after talks with Boris Johnson. Barely containing his anger and frustration, Mr Bettel said Mr Johnson had failed to put forward any serious proposals to allow a deal before the end of October, and accused the Conservatives of holding hostage the futures of EU citizens for party political gain. The two men had been due to give a joint news conference, but Mr Johnson pulled out after a group of noisy protesters gathered nearby, leaving Mr Bettel gesturing to an empty podium. Our correspondent Adam Fleming reports on today's events in Luxembourg.
There were fewer than 100 anti-Brexit protesters outside the office of Luxembourg's Prime Minister, Xavier Bettel, but the chants, the music and the megaphones made it sound like many, many more. And Boris Johnson was supposed to be doing an outdoor press conference just meters away from them. Behind the scenes, the Luxembourgish and British delegations tried to avoid a diplomatic incident, move inside to a room that wouldn't fit all the journalists, silence the host to save the blushes of the guest, hope the demonstrators would take a break. The end result was an impassioned one-man show by Mr Bettel. He walked out alone, no Boris Johnson to be seen, and stood, again, alone, in front of EU, Luxembourg and Union flags. Beside him, an empty podium.
Our people need to know what is going to happen to them in 6 weeks' time. They need clarity, they need certainty, and they need stability. You can't hold their future hostage for party political gains.
He called on the British to table proposals to break the Brexit deadlock.
For me, I just have one withdrawal agreement on the table, and it's the one from last year. There are no changes. There are no concrete proposals for the moment on the table. And I won't give an agreement to ideas. We need written proposals, and the time is ticking. So stop speaking, but act if you want that we are able to discuss about different proposals. But we won't accept any agreement who goes against the single market or who will be against the Good Friday Agreement.
Instead of being outside at the news conference, Boris Johnson was at the residence of the British ambassador, where he recorded a short interview instead.
I don't think it would have been fair to the Prime Minister of Luxembourg to... I think there was clearly going to be a lot of noise, and I think our points might have been drowned out, but I'm happy to talk to you now.
The trip had begun with the Prime Minister sharing a friendly 2-hour lunch of chicken and fish with the President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker. No concrete proposals were put on the table, but the two sides agreed their negotiating teams should meet on a daily basis. Although this trip is likely to be remembered for a messy media opportunity rather than any momentum injected into the talks.
Despite the clear frustration from his European counterparts, Mr Johnson defended his approach, insisting there was still a good chance of getting a deal. He said a lot of work had been done and papers had been shared. Here's our assistant political editor, Norman Smith.
Far from being cowed by today's diplomatic rebuffs and protests, Mr Johnson appeared unperturbed, defiant, and once again. Following lunch with the EU president, he even declared himself a little more optimistic, citing what he claimed was a greater willingness to engage. In a BBC interview, he reiterated his view that there was a landing space for a deal and still time to secure one. Everyone can see what needs to be done, he said. Mr Johnson also once again categorically ruled
Boris
out any
Johnson.
further delay. Such an idea, he said,